Up to this point, we've talked about chords in a somewhat limited way. We've spelled them in root position, in a stack of thirds, and that's pretty abstract. In real music, chords can appear in a lot of different ways. We can have different members of the chord in the bass position, meaning the lowest note. We can double different notes in the chord, and we can voice them in many different ways. One of our goals in this class is to learn how to identify chords in various textures, in various voicings, and to be able to reduce it down to its most fundamental components. There exists a system called figured bass, which acts as a shorthand device summarizing the position of any given chord. And this system we're going to learn about today. It originated in the Baroque era, think like J.S. Bach, as a system for indicating chords with as little information as possible, mostly for improvisation. So musicians would see a bass line and then figures beneath it, and they would know how to realize those chords in real time. This is not at all dissimilar from how lead sheet symbols are used today for jazz and church music. So I'm going to show you here an example of what figured bass can look like. If you take a look at example 2 from the Figured Bass and Chord Inversion Guide, you will see a piece by Johann Sebastian Bach. And you will see here that we are given not only a bass line, but also a melody line. And then there are numbers beneath the staff that refer to the chord realization that performers would improvise above that bass line. I have a recording of the piece in its realization. Take a listen. This is the Kalmus Ensemble.
So gehst du nun, mein Jesu, hin, den Tod für mich zu leiden. Für mich, der ich ein Sünder bin, der dich betrübt in Freuden. Wohlan verfolgst du edler Braut, mein Augen sollen fließen. Ein Tränen sie mit Ach und Weh, dein Leiden zu begießen.
Nowadays, in contrast to what performers did in the 18th century, we use figured bass symbols also as a system of analysis. So not just as a system to improvise chords, but also in our theory and analytical studies. And it's so important that we're going to need to learn how it works for this class. In short, figured bass symbols simply show the intervals above the bass note so that you can construct or improvise a chord with just a bass note and the figured bass symbol. I'd like to show you some examples of how this works. This is the A minor triad in root position. There are two other positions this chord could appear in. If the third of the chord is in the bass, like so, we would call this first inversion. Root position, first inversion. The other position we have available to us is called second inversion, and that is when the fifth of the chord is the lowest sounding note. Root position, first inversion, second inversion. Okay, so using these chords in their most closed position, the way I've written them here, I will show you how the figured bass symbols correspond with these. The full figured bass for root position we call a 5-3. Why? Because there is a third above the bass and a fifth above the bass. A to C, that's a third above the bass. A to E, that's a fifth above the bass. Following this same logic for first inversion, we call this a 6-3. Why? Because the bass is C and we have a third above it and a sixth above it. Following this same logic, we call the second inversion figured bass 6-4. Why? Because there's a fourth and a sixth above the bass note, in this case E. There's our fourth, there's our sixth. 6-4. So those are the full figured bass symbols that are used. Well, I don't mean to make your lives more complicated, but in practice, we don't use these full symbols. We use an abbreviated version of these, and I'd like to show you what that looks like. The good news, second inversion always uses 6-4. We need both of those numbers to tell its second inversion. First inversion, we use the abbreviated form 6. So if you see a 6, you can understand the third is implied. Root position, nothing. Think about it. That is our quintessential, probably most common type of position used. So it's easier if we just keep it blank. You assume it's a root position triad. The 5 and the 3 are implied. In sum, root position, no symbol. First inversion, just a 6. Second inversion, the full symbol, 6-4.